Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'll try that introduction. I'm Vivian White. I work at the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. Many of you probably know me from the NASA Night Sky Network. I recognize a lot of your names. I am so glad you're here tonight, and this is the second of three meetings about confidence and curiosity girls at the telescope. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks to Anna Hurst and Brian Cruz, who are also here with me. And again, just thanks to everybody for joining and for being interested in this. We had really wonderful responses. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. Oh, yeah, I'm overexcited. This is week 2, and we're going to be talking today about some of the stories that we tell and messages we send, whether they're messages we want to be sending or messages we don't want to be sending, and how to send the messages we want to send to everybody who comes to the telescope or everyone we're working with doing astronomy outreach. It has been, this is what we're going to be doing. In particular, I'll check in with you guys about how your week went. We're going to talk about what it feels like to be included and excluded. I'm sure we all have experiences with those, and how society gives us different messages as we go through our lives, and how we tell some of those messages ourselves, and then some how to do it differently. So that'll be the storytelling and some pieces about what is coming up next for the final webinar. We're just now getting from the point where we're talking about why we do outreach specifically to girls and why it's really important that we think about how we do that. And we're getting into some of the details about what we can do differently. So I know you had the growth mindset last week. Did anybody get to noticing any of the growth mindset pieces when you were out in the world over the last week? Did you hear anybody use growth mindset, or did you hear anybody not use growth mindset and say, I for example, I am really working on not saying that I can't cook, because I have always thought that I can't cook, but I'm really working on saying I'm learning how to cook. If anybody wants to chime in via the chat, or unmute yourselves and let us know if you heard anything.
Some of you shared some examples in the forum, but you can feel free to repeat them now as well.
I actually had a quick example. I was volunteering at a local museum last Monday, actually during the Mercury transit. I was actually indoors, helping in a space exhibit though, so still space related. And it was really interesting. I was working with this little girl with something similar to a MOLA map. So it was that exhibit from NISENet where you put in the blocks for the different elevations. And her grandma was sitting right there. And I was kind of interacting with this girl. She wasn't talking back to me. She was just kind of looking at me and nodding occasionally, or just pointing at things. And her grandma kind of looked at me out of the view of her granddaughter, and she kind of mouthed to me that her granddaughter was autistic. And it was really interesting that she brought it up, because I was actually just having this great interaction with this little girl, showing her the stuff and asking her questions. And even though she wasn't talking to me, she was showing me her answers. And so it was kind of interesting. Her grandma was expecting me to notice something. And if she hadn't mentioned it, I don't know if I would. So kind of fixed mindset in a way.
Right. Oh, that's great. Thank you,
Michaela. Thanks for sharing that. A few have come in the chat, Vivian.
Great.
Julia says our financial team chair said she wasn't a math person.
Yikes. And clearly.
Carol says, I told my husband that he was good at fixing things, but then corrected myself. And that's a nice reminder that even a positive comment can still be in that fixed mindset framing. And then Emily says, I have a hard time with math, but I hired a math tutor and he helped me realize I just need more practice and guidance instead of feeling like I can't do math.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. I hope that you got to see the Mercury transit at least online if you got clouded out. The SDO web feed was pretty phenomenal. I just grabbed this from the NASA SDO site. You should definitely check out the video. This was just a single shot from that, but if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. All right, thanks everybody.
We have a question also. Can we take a few moments to talk a little bit more about it?
Sure.
Is that all right? Yeah. So Dennis had a question. He said he may have been working on this type of language without even realizing it. And he asks, given the general concept of society where we measure, rate, and reward everything in both school and workplace, is it reasonable to apply the growth mindset model in all instances? Shouldn't we take into account the group we're working with? Aren't some encouraged by successes like saying you did an outstanding job?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, we encourage you to heap praise upon people when they deserve it. And even better is give them more specific praise about, you did a fantastic job. I really like the way that you showed up even when you didn't have to be here, and really helped out our team. Give really specific praise about how they did great. Absolutely. We find that better than just saying good job, because it doesn't, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, it just doesn't, good job is saying that or it kind of sounds a little bit like you are a good person at this. You know how to do these things, but giving specific process praise on what they did can encourage them and anyone else who's listening to do more of that. and they're not a good worker necessarily, but they're doing a good job at something. So yeah, absolutely.
It's not that the praise is bad. It's just that giving specifics about the process and what they did well can ultimately provide better encouragement and make it more welcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the being smart piece is a really interesting one. You are so smart. And I feel like I want to tell people that all the time. And I just check myself if I do say something like that, say, you're so smart. Well, I actually really just like how you did this particular thing. Like you showed a lot of thought in that. It must have taken a while for you to figure that out, maybe. So yeah, exactly. I hope that answers some of that question. There was another note.
Yeah, and Bob has one up here that I don't want to get lost. He says that he's on his road at his son's, but I've heard so many I always this week that he couldn't help but notice how common fixed mindset is. Is it maybe a defensive mechanism that a lot of us use?
Yeah, absolutely. The growth mindset is just acknowledging that we can always learn something new and we can always do better. So it's not fixing anyone and the abilities that they have. It's allowing them the space and opportunity to grow. And absolutely praising people when they deserve it. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. All right, we can please keep asking questions. And if that didn't answer it, ask again, ask in a different way. And maybe we can all together give feedback and work it out. All right, see if I can. Okay, here's the piece. I want us all to just take a second, or maybe sit up straight and put our feet on the floor, unless you're driving, and then just keep driving. If you're driving, don't follow instructions. But if you're not driving, I'd like for you to take just a minute and maybe close your eyes if that feels comfortable. And I want you to think about a time that you felt excluded from something. It may have been a party you didn't get invited to, or something that people found out about that you didn't know about. So take just a minute, whatever that might be, a time when you felt excluded. Take just a minute to feel what that feeling is in your body. What did it feel like to you? Okay. So now that we've felt what that kind of feels like, I want to bring us back, and we're going to feel one more thing. What, you can close your eyes again, maybe shake off that feeling of exclusion, and close your eyes and think about a time when you felt like you were one with the universe, like everything was going your way and you could do anything. Maybe you just solved a really hard problem, or everything that day was going your way and people were smiling at you, and you got all the green lights on your way to work. So take a minute and remember, think about what it feels like to feel those feelings for just a second. All right. Thank you for indulging my very California reflection. I appreciate it. I hope that you got a chance to just kind of feel what those two feelings feel like. And what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and create more of that second feeling, that feeling that we can do anything, that the people we are working with have the ability and the capacity to do anything that they want, not that they are excluded from anything, especially anything that we happen to be doing. So I want you to think about those feelings too in this next piece. So we're gonna watch a really brief video, and I want you to think about those feelings as they relate to this quick video.
If you think about it, science is like everything.
It can really help you uncover like small little secrets. I built a garage door opener, and I'm working on my own website.
I built a computer and I opened a fridge with a Lego.
When I was littler, I used to think technology was great. And then I started thinking that it was more of a boys' thing.
I think that inventing is like for boys because they have Albert Einstein invented, he was a guy, and Benjamin Franklin also.
There used to be a girl in the robotics class, but she quit, and so I'm the only girl left. Oh, you can't like science, you're a girl. You can't like any of these science things. In commercials, I saw a lot more men doing it.
They might really love science, but they might be like afraid. People might think, oh, don't boys do that? That's a boy thing.
Thank you. Wow.
Okay, I'm actually going to pause it there because I think it's kind of commercially. What did you notice? What did you notice about the way they felt, these girls felt about science, or the way they felt about being a girl who loved science? Again, you can just feel free to turn your microphone on and say anything you'd like, or put it in the chat and we can catch you there. Yeah, it was a boys thing. That science, they thought that science was a boys thing. Yeah. Yeah. They felt like outsiders, said Ernie. And if you're the only one doing something, it does become a statement. It's a really interesting thing Michaela just said. But the instant there's another girl, it becomes more comfortable that you're not the only one. Yeah, and they love the idea of being really innovative and creative and sciencey until they saw and heard that it was only for boys. So they got that message. All right, so thank you, Julia. Yeah, Julia said she was the only one in my first college calculus class, and it's really uncomfortable. Yeah, I have felt that as well. Girls love science, but felt that the boys were scientists. Interesting. Oh, I like that observation. Very cool. Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask you to compare and contrast that with this.
If you think about it, science is...
Just kidding. Okay, I'm going to ask you, this is also another really short clip, and I just want to show you, take a minute and compare and contrast what you learned in that, or what we saw in this one, and then with what we're about to see. Let's try this.
Do you think that programming is fun or not fun?
Fun.
Why is programming fun?
Because it's like you're being the boss of things. Telling this what to do, and then that thing tells that what to do.
Careers in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, are rewarding and often well-paying. But there's a problem. As early as elementary school, girls are less likely than boys to play with science and technology-related games and toys. But this raises a big question. Are girls less likely to play with these toys because they're less interested? Or are they less interested because they've been given fewer opportunities to play?
The thing that I think is a really big take-home message is how early it starts, that if we want to bring more women into the STEM pipeline, we have to start early.
Our research study at the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington tested what happened when we gave 6-year-old children the chance to play a robot programming game. Would girls become more interested and confident in programming? If girls and boys get the exact same experience, would they show equal interest in programming? We brought 96 children into our lab. One group of children learned how to program a smartphone using drag and drop programming and made an animal robot move along a series of tiles.
Man, this is awesome.
We also had 2 control groups. One that played a different game.
One throws a cook. The cook was secretly a witch.
And one that played no game at all. Then we asked them all how interested they were in programming and robots, and how good they were with robots. In our control groups, we found the typical gender gap. Boys were more interested and confident than girls when it came to programming and robots. But for the children who played our robot programming game, there was no difference between girls and boys in their interest and confidence. And the girls who had gotten this experience with robots were more interested and confident compared to the girls who had not. These findings are exciting. Girls' interest and confidence in STEM are not set in stone. They are malleable. STEM experiences are like a charging station. Each opportunity allows students to charge up their skills and motivation in STEM. If girls get more positive experiences with technology, they have more chances to discover a passion. We found that even 20 minutes is enough to plant that seed and have a big impact on the attitudes of girls in our study. We hope that our findings will also have an impact on educational practice by inspiring teachers and families to provide more of these experiences to girls to broaden their participation in technology fields. Our lab is also looking at other ways we can get girls more excited about STEM from preschool through high school, and we hope that our studies will have an impact by advancing research on girls in STEM. STEM starts early. Age 6 is not too early to start learning how to program and to learn that programming is exciting. What happens when we give girls these experiences?
Cool. Oh my God, that was super cool.
Do you think that...
Just kidding. All right. I'd love to hear what you took out of that one. Were there any messages that you noticed that, anything that came across really strongly to you, or something you might have noticed? Michaela, you said it's the exact same experience. Tell me more. Oh, they had the same experience. So the girls weren't just getting a girl version of something. They had the same experience as everyone else. Absolutely. Yeah, and Julia said the girls need access to this kind of stimuli. Yeah, Emily, I think that's my favorite part too. 20 minutes is enough to plant this seed. I mean, it just doesn't take that much time to change the way they think of themselves. Yeah, just giving them an opportunity that if they have that opportunity, they will enjoy it. And just how enthusiastic they were. Thank you guys. Yeah, I agree. You guys caught a lot. Anybody else? Brian or Anna, have you got other thoughts on? Feel free to hop in. Yeah, they were really, really just thrilled about the opportunity to do it and getting to learn about coding. So this is coding. It's not astronomy, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else to note is look at what a short experience that was for these girls that changed their attitude, right? It was just a short interaction, and that short interaction made a big difference already.
Yeah. So we might be doing outreach, right? We might get to see someone at the telescope for 10 minutes, but that 10 minutes, like, let's make those 10 minutes count and make it a welcoming experience. So we're going to talk a little about that.
Do you think that programming is fun or not fun?
She still thinks it's fun. All right. So last week, Anna talked a lot about the growth mindset and the language, and please keep asking questions about that. Today, we're going to talk about the micromessaging and storytelling as ways that we can change how we interact with girls and everyone at the telescope and beyond. And then next week, we will address these questioning and addressing misconceptions, as well as specific tools when you're at the telescope. And there's going to be a really easy to implement action plan that everyone gets to work through so that you're ready when you go out and do outreach next time. So I want to just take a second and talk a little bit about this first topic of micromessaging. Now, you might have heard sometimes we hear about microaggressions, and micromessaging is more than that. It's actually all the many, many different messages that we both give off, that we send out, and also that we get every single day. So micromessaging is more of a general term because it can be both positive and negative. And they're just little ways in which we interact with people. So if you look on the left, the woman who's leaning over her desk, she is engaging with the person, showing that she's interested. So are both of the women in the center picture. They are looking each other in the eye, they're shaking hands. So these two on the left are micro affirmations. So they're giving positive messages as though they're interested in what the other person has to say, and are engaging in equal dialogue. On the right, there is just an example from this amazing project called I Too Am Harvard. It's a Tumblr, it's got the URL right there. And it is an example of a lot of micro inequities. So these are negative messages that people get. I believe this one is all people of color who are there to list all the things that people have said to them over the time that they have been in Harvard. For example, this woman here says, "You're lucky to be Black. Must be so easy to get into college." And over time, we hear these many, many different micro messages from lots and lots of different people, and many of them might be well-intentioned. We also say them all the time. We say them to each other, to people we work with, to people we do outreach with, to our family. We are giving off these messages all the time. So it's just really important that we think about the way we talk and how other people might interpret those. So Anna, were there other notes on that one? I feel like there was a piece there that I'm missing.
Let me double check for you.
Thanks. We're going to talk after this just a little bit about,
I wonder if anyone has examples of their own examples of micro messages that they've heard.
Yeah, I will start you off because I was on a call this morning and someone said, "Oh, silly little girl," when I said something. And I was like, well, I'm 42 years old and I may be silly sometimes, but that was not a way to talk to a work colleague, even if you didn't agree with what I was saying. So it's ways that we can feel like, oh, they don't actually respect who I am, even, and they wouldn't have said, "Oh, silly little boy," to a little boy who was to a grown man who was on the call. That would have been totally ridiculous. So we hear them all the time.
Anyone else have examples? Remembering that they're not always negative. They can also be
right.
Positive. They can be one of these micro affirmations.
Oh, interesting. Michaela asks, are the positive ones different than praise? So yeah, I would absolutely say so. They're different in praise in that we are implying something maybe without saying it directly. So as opposed to saying something like, I can't, let's see, I can't believe you're a scientist, or something like that. Something like, hooray, more women in science, or there are, I'm trying to think of a good example of a micro-message.
I can think of an example of one that's like a micro affirmation. Well, see what you think, Vivian. So there's been a few times where I've worked on large projects, either work projects or volunteer projects, where the person in charge has really made a point to learn everyone's name and remember their name and thank them personally, which, as someone who has been a lead on some large projects, I know is really challenging because you have a lot of details to keep track of. And I've always appreciated when someone who is leading a project makes the time to make those personal connections and remember people's names. That's right there, like something small that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Julia was saying she struggles with hugging too much. Should be aware that should be aware that some folks see that as condescending. Yeah, maybe so. It's just good to kind of think about that. Say, when speaking on a phone, saying things with a smile changes you into a more welcoming person. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. So Dennis was saying, in my outreach, I'd love to use personal interaction and a hands-on experience. I bend a couple of the science rules in order to present some of the reasons for those rules and show that it's okay and can be a good thing, especially if it makes learning and science fun and exciting. Interesting, yeah. All right. Yeah, so we'll get into some of these and talk a little bit more about that. How about that? And if you think of other ones along the way, don't hesitate to either, I guess, just put them in the chat. Oh, this is a really interesting one. So does anyone know, has anyone used with your students or outreach at any of your events the Draw a Scientist activity? This has been going on. The idea of this has been tested, and we've been studying it for 50 years now, which is kind of amazing. And 50 years ago, less than 1% of children who were asked to draw a scientist drew a female person. They 99.4% drew men, and that's male and female children. So it's easy to think that, you know, that was a very, very long time ago. And indeed, things are changing quite a bit. I think at this point, 28% of children now draw females when they draw, when they're asked to draw a scientist. So this was just redone as a large study pretty recently. I think they had over 1,000 students in the study. But there's a really interesting trend here as well. So around 10 or 11, that shifts dramatically. In fact, so girls who are asked to draw a scientist, when they are 6 years old, something like 73% of them draw a female as a scientist. At 6 years old, they have an easier time envisioning themselves as a scientist. But by the time they're 16, that number drops to, Anna, do you have my notes? I think it drops to less than 20%. I can check those numbers exactly when we get off, but it becomes dramatically lower. So at 6, they thought anyone, including themselves, can be a scientist. And by the time they're 16, they have gotten a lot of more messages, and they have, and they almost, more than 80% of them draw men as scientists. So it's really different how these stereotypes start to add up, these messages that we get about who is a scientist, who isn't a scientist. Yeah, so I wanted to, has anybody else done this test with anyone? We used to do it, there was a program called Project Astro that Brian runs, and you bring an astronomer into the classroom, and I was the classroom astronomer, and we did this in class, the teacher would ask them to draw a scientist before I got there. And pretty unanimously, this was 15 years ago, about 80% of them drew men. And they were surprised to see me when I came in as an astronomer to the classroom. So I don't know if anybody else, I can, if you actually just draw a scientist test, you can see the most recent findings. You can Google that. It's pretty amazing. All right.
I think we probably could scare up the draw an astronomer activity and maybe post it into the forum this week.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. We can post the activity and along with the actual statistics.
Yeah.
For the draw a scientist.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. This is some examples of micromessaging that women report that they hear, especially women of color hear very often. I would never have guessed that you were a scientist. And this may be super well-intentioned. I've probably said this myself many years ago when I was excited and surprised that someone I met was a scientist. And we have to be really aware of what that sounds like to someone who has had to fight against a lot of preconceptions and in order to become a scientist. So it is possible that when we say, I would have never guessed you were a scientist, that they're hearing you don't belong in the sciences, or this is not the place for you. It's something that when we are aware of what we're talking about, it's not that we have to watch every word we say, but we need to start thinking about our what we are saying and its effects on other people. Were there any other notes on that one, Anna?
Yeah, so this is just something that Teresa wrote. I'll just read her words. Rather than seeing the dearth of women of color in the astronomical community as a passive circumstance, there are data that indicate that their numbers are at least in part a result of being pushed out by hostile workplace experiences. And they show that women of color face greater risks of gendered and racial harassment in this field. So it's not just that, it's not only a circumstance of the messages they got when they were young girls, but also because sometimes they are actively pushed out of these fields.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Teresa gave some references. We can even share those in the forum.
Yeah, great notes.
Carol kind of related something in the chat about an inequity in the workplace between, I think, male and female. She said, I have a colleague who has her male subordinate work only weekdays because he is serious about his girlfriend, she says. I feel as though I am serious about my husband, although I regularly work Saturdays. And so I think that kind of fits in with this thread that we're talking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We can see that often, I think, and probably they don't even know that they're doing that they're making those different distinctions between you and your colleague. Yeah. Thanks, Carol. So does anyone know who these women are here? Yeah, right? They just earned the Presidential Medal of Honor, I believe.
Katherine Johnson did. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mary Jackson and Dorothy Vaughan.
You got it, exactly. All right, so some of you recognize them. I got some head nods from you out there. Some of you recognize them from Hidden Figures, the movie or the book. They often got something along the lines of, I would have never guessed that you were a scientist, but we know their story because their stories have been told. And this is a big part of it too. So we asked you this week to name some of your favorite female scientists, and we'll get to them in just a minute, or female astronomers. Telling these stories about women who are working in astronomy, women who have made changes in the field, telling their story is why other women get to see that there are women in astronomy. So I'm gonna go to the next slide here. Are there any Star Trek fans here? Now, Teresa is a big Star Trek fan, and I have to admit, oh good, go Skip, of course you are. Okay, somebody tell me who this is. Yeah, Uhura. Sorry, see that I show my ignorance.
I think the actress's name is Nichelle Nichols. Oh yeah, and Julia just said it. So Nichelle Nichols.
Yeah, yay. Okay, so we have a lot of Star Trek fans out there. Oh my gosh, someone just met her. Whoa, that's amazing. So Nichelle Nichols was, for those of us who had to be educated on this, she was early on in Star Trek, and she was on the, so she had a prominent role in early Star Trek. And I will tell you a quick story about her that I do know. She met one of her heroes came on set, and Dr. Martin Luther King told the story that he and his wife didn't let their children watch much TV, but they let them watch Star Trek because of her, because they could see her on TV. And she told Dr. King that she was thinking of leaving the show, and he said, absolutely, please do not leave the show. He said that for the first time she was, an actor was being shown as they were supposed to be shown, not as a Black actor, but as an actor. And this was the first time many people of color had seen a Black woman on TV who was not in a subordinate position, who was not either a maid or the sidekick, or she showed up in her full self and was part of a team. And that was the first time that had actually happened on TV. And she made waves. And being able to see someone who looks like you in a role that you might want to do has huge effects. Mae Jemison here on the left credits Nichelle Nichols in her role with allowing her to dream of being an astronaut. And
I have a quote if you want me to read it.
Oh, please do. Yes, great.
Yeah, so Mae Jemison said, as a little girl growing up on the south side of Chicago in the 60s, I always knew that I was going to be in space. She said from the podium in Richard White Lecture Hall, Star Trek's Lieutenant Uhura, an African-American character from science fiction, encouraged her to literally reach for the stars.
Yeah, and
also Whoopi Goldberg, who later played Guinan on Star Trek Next Generation, described Uhura as a role model for her, recalling that she told her family, I just saw a Black woman on television and she ain't no maid.
Yeah, really and truly. If you have never seen someone who looks like you in a position doing something that you might want to do, it's very hard to kind of imagine to put yourself there. So Nichelle Nichols has been a huge inspiration to a lot of people.
And Julia a little bit ago put something in the chat at kind of to counter, that she said, my daughter is a woman of color. You're really well spoken for a colored girl.
Ooh, yeah, that happens.
And that's a negative micro message.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you, because there's a lot of assumptions behind that statement. Yeah, so while you might think that you are giving someone a compliment, think about what would you give that to another person who looked different than the person you're talking to, as a compliment especially. So I get. And
I think that's I think that fits him because I think that's why it's really, really important to have these role models, being able to have people see people in these situations, and hopefully that will make them realize that that's clearly inappropriate.
Absolutely, and we're all learning. We'll all make mistakes as we go. I get a lot from men like, oh, well, I can't be a role model for young girls, and I absolutely don't think that that's true. I think you can be an amazing role model for young women, and you can do that by sharing women's stories. You can be the one that tells about Carolyn Herschel, or you can be the one who tells the stories of these women. I use this as an example because, I am not a Black woman. I cannot understand those experiences that they go through. however, I can tell their stories, like I just told these stories here. And by telling their stories, I am helping us all to better understand and maybe see ourselves in these women. So just by telling the stories, you are opening up the playing field to more and more people. I think there's some more notes on there. Anna, do you have any on there?
Just a moment. Let's see. I'll read what Teresa wrote.
Yeah, thanks.
Telling different stories is important, and valuing everyone's contribution is important. Treat each person with respect and believe each person can have a meaningful astronomy experience. This isn't just about women or people of color, but anyone who might feel excluded.
Absolutely.
And Teresa says that she encourages you all to do the work and go into the uncomfortable spaces. Like maybe you feel like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm sharing the story the right way. But it's up to us to change and make change. We have to change in order to make change.
Even if I can't pronounce Uhura very well, I can still start to tell the story and get more and more comfortable with it as we go. Yeah, Michela was saying she was reading about children's literature recently and representation in stories. A big phrase that stuck with her is children need windows and mirrors in stories. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Just like in astronomy, we need lenses and mirrors. Children and other humans need lenses and mirrors, lenses to see into other people's worldviews so that we can think about what it's like to be someone else, and mirrors showing back people who are like us doing things maybe that we want to do. Absolutely.
And the other thing that kind of goes along with that, there's a writer back in the 80s that said that you need sliding doors, clear sliding doors that they can see through, they can open the door and they can step through into the story themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, Dolores, I love that thought. Dolores just said, men can be powerful support for even older women. She's in her 60s and is just now realizing her potential thanks to some really special men. Yeah, most astronomers, amateur and otherwise, are still men. And all of us have a big role to play in making sure that women and girls feel welcome in astronomy. Oh, Kathy, exactly. Micromessaging is the new term for left-handed compliments. Although that's, yeah, like she says, that's improper to left-handed individuals. There are a lot of really great left-handed individuals. Yeah, kind of a backwards compliment. Often though, the thing about that is people don't know they're giving a backhanded compliment. Yeah, proper-handed to right-handers, says Dan. Thanks, you guys, exactly. Wonderful. Thanks, you guys. Oh, these are some of the stories that you shared this week. I was so excited to listen to all of those. And we'll have all of these up. They are in the chat in the forum, but we'll put them all up also for you to see. These are a lot of great women who are in astronomy, both current and past. And these are great stories to tell. So if you read through those, you'll have a whole new handful of stories that you can use, say, when you're talking about the distance ladder. How do we know how far away something is? Well, luckily we had Henrietta Swan-Leavitt, who helped us determine these things. There are quite a few others. Let's see.
We need to add Nancy Grace Roman to that list.
We do. There's a long list.
Oh, there she is.
There she is. Oh, good. She was the mother of Hubble. She did a lot of work to ensure that Hubble was viable and made it as a space telescope. There are so many women in astronomy that if you start practicing telling the stories, it's definitely going to be something that just comes naturally to you as you talk about things. So I was really impressed with this group I have not seen before. So we've given this workshop maybe 7 times now altogether. And you guys put forward more people that you knew, more moms and sisters and astronomy club members than anybody else that I'd ever seen. I was so thrilled that you know so many amazing female astronomers. So thank you so much. Also, saying I don't know, if you don't know any, is really powerful too. So that's recognizing that we don't hear these stories very often. So sometimes we get someone who says, I don't know any of the stories of female astronomers. And so here's a great chance to begin to know some of those. Yeah. Oh, excellent. All right. Anna just put a really cool, there's a really nice book called Breakfast Moon that breaks down some of those stereotypes. All right, let's see. Oh my gosh, I don't know where the hour went, but here we go. For next week, this is your challenge, should you choose to accept it. We dare you, no, we don't dare you. We would love for you to interview a woman about her science experience in life. This can be an amateur astronomer or someone who is not in the sciences at all. And just, there's some example questions, and we'll put this in the forum so you'll have all of this information. You don't have to write it down furiously or anything, but think about somebody you'd like to interview and just find out what their science experiences were. You can tell them you're taking this workshop and we're trying to understand better what women's stories are around science. And for those of us who aren't, for those of us who are women, they may be a different experience than we had in the sciences. And for the men out there, it might just be another window that you can look into and see what people's experiences are. And these are likely people you know pretty well. So it's interesting. It might be an interesting experience, and you can post about it online. You don't have to use their names, but it would be interesting to hear what you guys found out. Let's see. Oh, wow. Okay. Let me see if I can put this in the chat. Let's see if I even can.
I can do it, Viv.
Okay, thanks so much. Somebody, if you could put that evaluation in the chat. There are just 2 quick questions about this, about tonight's webinar. If you could answer those, I think that might be it. She's just going to put that in the chat, so you don't need to see it right up here because that's a lot of letters and numbers. But I will leave you with the one and only Michelle Nichols. Quote from her.
Wonderful. And does anyone have any final questions or comments? Thanks, Vivian. You did a great job.
Thank you.
You worked really hard to get through all those slides.
Thank you.
Even when you had trouble with the video. Working on my growth mindset language.
Thank you, Anna. You totally got it. I was going to say, yeah, so this micromessage idea, there was a question about where you can find lists of different types of messages. One of the things that's in the notes somewhere, and I forgot to mention, is there's an interesting study of bias out of Harvard. I think it's the Harvard bias study. Is that what it's called? Anna, do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where you can actually see some of your own biases, and we all have them. I mean, it's not, we all have them in many, many different ways, but they have a specific one on women in science that you can take and see where your biases lie, and then just make a note to yourself like, I want to make sure not to assume that all older women will know about science already, or all, whatever it happens to be. So the implicit bias test. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to come up with. Thank you, Michaela. So that's a really great place to start for those kind of what the micromessages that we might be delivering. I don't know that there is a list of them. I'm sure that there are lists of them. So let's look for some. Yeah, I will look around this week for lists of micromessages and maybe what to say instead. A really good rule of thumb would be like, would you say that to someone who looked different? And just think about that when you're gonna give someone a compliment or not. Yeah. Yeah, and if you guys want to actually chat, feel free to unmute and we can just talk, and that would be nice too. I'm going to hop out and stop sharing, and then we can all see each other, or I can see you guys better. Feel free to hop on your cameras. I hope I was saying your name right, Michaela. I'm not sure.
I think it's Michaela.
Michaela, thanks. Sorry. Learn something new every day. Michaela, thanks. All right. And if not, you have 8 whole minutes back to your evening. Thank you all so much for staying and listening and learning together. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Please use one of those minutes to fill out that short survey that I put in the chat. And I'm about to post those interview questions in the forum right now. And then Ava will be posting the recording either tonight or tomorrow. You can look for that if you want to review anything that we said. Otherwise, your task is to find a woman to interview and then reply to my message in the forum with any thoughts you have on it, on how that went and what you might have learned or anything you found interesting. And
I just put a link to the picture and astronomer activity that's on our on the ASP website into the chat.
Thanks.
And then we'll
that's a really fun one.
Yeah, we'll actually put the actual document into the forum as well.
Maureen, I hear you on that. She says, once I bought an accessory for my telescope and the salesman handed it to me and said, your husband's going to be really happy with this. And he assumed it was for a man because astronomy. Yeah, exactly. And it was just a mistake. It wasn't a big deal, but the assumptions behind that are what makes us feel sometimes like we're not welcome. Mm-hmm.
I have something to add to earlier about representation and how when you are somebody who identifies with a particular group, it does help attract others to the table. So one of the things we do when I volunteer at the library as a solar system ambassador, we'll often put my name and then girls who are looking at the calendar, they pick up on that it's a female presenting it. And so I've been finding I get really equal numbers between the boys and the girls who show up. And it's kind of interesting and of course not a necessity. I mean, if you're a man, that's wonderful to have everybody presenting, but it's really interesting when you do identify with a certain group. When you are a woman, you will have the girls come to you automatically.
Absolutely. Great. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. I look forward to it and look forward to keeping reading all of your things in the forum. Take care. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.